I know a woman who had a long history after 20 plus years of marriage of arguing with her husband about everything. He and she argued about money, the kids, the dog, the house, the coffee, their meals. Just, it never stopped. And gee, surprised, they were both miserable. She came here several months ago for an intervention, and about a month later, she wrote me and said that one day she went to feed the dog, and he happened to be coming by at the same time she was feeding the dog, and he said for easily the 100th time to her, "That's too much," meaning she put too much dog food in the dog bowl. Now, you'd think, who cares how much food the dog gets? I mean, why is it worth a comment? These two had arguments about that subject uncounted times. And it was always the beginning of the end. They'd argue about the amount, who has the best sense, whose dog it was, who thought of the dog in the beginning. I'm not making this stuff up. Who knows more about nutrition? Oh yeah, but who knows more about dog nutrition? And it would just go on and on and on and on. And so she wrote me about a month after she'd been here, and she fed the dog, and he said, "That's too much." But this time she'd learned something. She'd learned that she was worthwhile. She'd learned that he didn't come with her to the intervention. This is all stuff she'd learned about herself. She'd learned she was worthwhile. She'd learned that she matters. She'd learned that somebody criticizing her doesn't take away her worth. She'd learned that there are people that love her. She'd learned that no task is as important as loving another person. Now, that doesn't mean being a doormat, just it's more important to love somebody else. And loving often involves just genuine listening. So with all of that knowledge, and I don't just mean head knowledge, that knowledge in her heart that she was worthwhile, she immediately said, when he said, "That's too much," well, let's put as much food in the bowl as you would like. So she picked up the bowl, the dog food bowl, and handed him the dog food, whatever, box, bag, something. Maybe it was canned dog food, I don't know. And she said, put in as much as you think is the right amount. She said that he looked like he'd been slapped, because she had, in all these years that they'd gone through multiple dogs, she had never asked him how much he thought there should be. They just argued about it instead. So in his shock, he put in the amount in the bowl that he thought the dog should be fed. And then she got out a measuring cup. I don't know how much food the dog was given, whether it was a cup or more, 3-cup measuring cup, but she measured exactly how much he'd put it in. And she said, "Thank you. So now I'll know exactly how much to, in fact, I'll mark it right here on the measuring cup so that every time I feed the dog, I'll feed the dog this much." And as she was marking the measuring cup, he started laughing. And eventually they were both laughing uncontrollably together, as they both realized how ridiculous it had been all of those 20 years to argue about how much food the dog was going to get. Why were they able to laugh? Because they were caring about each other. Because she made the decision to listen to him instead of argue with him. It's a big point. Here's somebody who says, "I'm in a women's group that I like, but there are no what you would call real love people. Nobody who's studying the real love books or going to conference calls and the like. Yesterday, the group met, and I found myself deeply upset at other people's inability to truly listen. Of course, especially to what I was saying during my turn to talk. Is there a kind way that I could present information about listening to help the group learn how to be better listeners? Probably not. You got to remember that poor listening comes from pain. When people are in pain, the only thing that they're thinking about when they speak is themselves. So, is there a way that you could do a presentation about better listening? There are hundreds of books about better listening and better communication, and I'll bet nobody in the audience can remember the title of one of them. I can't, and I've read several of them. Because until you change your heart, until you're less wounded, until you're in less pain, until you're able to be more loving and listen, it doesn't really matter what technique you use. So poor listening comes from pain and concurrent selfishness, and you're not going to change that unless the group wants to address that subject. Pain, the healing of pain, healing of wounds, learning how to love, and then learning how to listen. If the group wants to address all of that, sure, go for it. But if you're just going to deliver a monologue about how we don't listen very well to each other, just go sit in a closet somewhere and deliver it to yourself. There was a woman who asked if it would do any good to come for an intervention here without her husband. He was this big, tough guy who said that he didn't want to, quote, learn any of that stupid stuff, end quote. And I said, sure, you could come by yourself. If he absolutely refuses to come, you would get loved, and then you would go home and you would give it to him. So she did. She came. And she made an amazing decision to trust. More than most people do. Really trusted hugely. Then she went home and she simply started loving him. No arguments, no teaching, just touching, listening to him, looking into his eyes when he spoke, instead of what we like to call multitasking, which is just a horrible word. Multitasking means a way to simultaneously not pay attention to multiple things. Awful word. And he started to change. He started to write love notes from work, which is a completely new thing for him. She said, just a few days ago, she said, there have been a whole series of firsts just in the first couple of weeks, sending love notes. He's been holding her hand. He was working on a 3-dimensional puzzle. And as she went by, he would never have involved her in such a thing. He did that kind of thing to escape, really. He asked her to be involved. He would come home sick from work. He never came home sick from work in the past. He would work through pneumonia and a heart attack and sepsis all at the same time and would stay at work. He would come home from work so that she would touch him and look at him and listen to him and take care of him. She said, it's like waking up from a bad dream. I'm waking up to being me. I'm waking up to learning how to be a loving wife. And she said, oh, by the way, my nightmares that I used to have all the time when I slept have disappeared. Miracles happen when people are loved. Love causes miracles. Love melts monsters. Love causes miracles. The power seems to be limitless. 13-year-old girl, new subject, has read Real Love and Real Love in Parenting. And she was in the kitchen and she was listening to a conversation between her father and mother. Her mother was fixing dinner. The mother said, I'm going to need some onions to finish making dinner. Would you run into town and get me some? And the father said, well, and he did just what I just did. Well, and then there was this long pause, And then he said, I don't know if I can. Can you do without the onions? So the 13-year-old girl comes into the room from hearing this from the next room and speaks to her father and says, I would really like to have been there for this. She said, do you see how you just told Mom that she was a huge inconvenience to you? I love it when kids know these principles because you can't get away with stuff anymore. The father argued with her, of course, but look at what the girl realized. The girl later asked me on Skype if she was right about everything that she'd said to her father. Yeah. There's more. Not only was he selfish, but he then asked his wife to take the responsibility for his selfishness from him. Remember? Because he said, couldn't you do without the onions? In other words, he wanted to be selfish and irresponsible and then have her take responsibility for it so that, because he wanted her to say, yeah, I can do without the onions, which is what she's always done in the past. Now he can be selfish and not feel selfish. So the 13-year-old girl recognized all of this, which is why I so strongly recommend that families read together the Real Love and Parenting book, because then everybody's on the same page. If you want to be held accountable as a parent for unloving behavior, read Real Love and Parenting out loud with your kids and say to your kids, if I ever do any of these unloving things, I want you to point them out. You won't get away with anything. I know a woman who is fairly experienced with Real Love, and she sent me an email that said this: I willingly entered into a dysfunctional relationship with a friend we'll call Mona. And I kept hoping that she would stop drowning and become capable of an equal friendship. But this has been going on for more than 2 years, and she still acts like a big-time victim. And I've learned that I really can't help her. And I'm not willing to listen to her complain anymore. So can you recommend a kind way for me to let this friend know that I'm no longer available to help her or be her friend? So I can tell you a way. Whether she decides that it's kind is out of your control. So first, there is no way to end this friendship that won't offend her. You really have to get that into your head. You've already identified her as a veteran victim. So she will take this in a victim way, no matter how you do it, and will either be really hurt or really mad or both. It's very common that we want to tell somebody something difficult and have them like us. No. Usually you have to choose between the two. Usually you don't get both. You want a way to tell her that she won't be hurt or mad. Not going to happen. Third, knowing 1 and 2 that I just mentioned, you need to keep it straight and simple. So if you really want out of this relationship, just keep it clean and simple and short. I would text or email this. Now, there are people who would say, oh, that's just a cowardly thing to do. And in fact, but keep in mind, victims love to be offended no matter what. So if you deliver this message in person, she's going to be offended and she's going to interrupt you so that you won't be able to finish it. If you send it by text or email, she's going to be offended because it's impersonal, but at least she won't be able to interrupt you. So I would actually suggest that you text or email this and say something like this. Mona, I'm grateful for the time that we spent together for the past couple of years, but I'm not enjoying the relationship like I used to. See how honest that is? Not I hate you, just I'm not enjoying it. More important, you are stuck in a victim mentality that's hurting you and is distracting to me. Notice the difference. It's hurting her, it's just distracting you. Then you continue. So I won't be contacting you anymore, nor will I be responding to your contacts. I hope that you can get some help for the pain in your life. My friend, that would sound pretty harsh to many people. If you say anything short of that, she's going to keep coming back and she's going to keep asking questions. There aren't very many questions to ask after this delivery. My friend, the one who wrote me this, who asked me how to break off her relationship with her friend Mona, asked if maybe that wasn't just a little harsh, and couldn't she soften it somehow and say that maybe circumstances had changed. The typical cowardly stuff that we say to people we don't want to offend, or that maybe she was just too empty or something, meaning the lady who's writing me, not her friend. Yeah, you could soften your message, but it wouldn't be honest. And you've been doing really well in that department. You'd completely lack integrity if you said it softer, and the woman is not going to like anything you say if you end your friendship. So why not tell her the truth? Now, the likelihood that when you tell her the truth, she's going to say, a victim mentality? I'd never realized that. You don't happen to have a book on victimhood, do you? The likelihood of that is 0. But what if that's the one seed that finally prompts her to do something with her life? She'll probably go on acting like a victim and losing friend after friend after friend. Well, I'm sure she already has been doing that. And how many of her friends do you think have had the courage to really tell her why they've ended the friendship? Probably none. What if you're the first? And after losing another 5 friends, one day she goes, I had one friend who told me the reason that I lost my friendship with her. And then she does look into doing something different about her life. You never know where seeds will go when you plant them. So you got very little to lose here, because she's going to hate it either way. Here's somebody who says, last night I locked myself out of my apartment for the second time this week. You'd think that after just one time of spending the night outside overnight and having to enlist the help of a man who's a paranoid schizophrenic and waiting 12 hours for maintenance to come and unlock the door, you'd think that I would have learned my lesson, but I didn't. You're going to get the lesson eventually, honey, when the price gets high enough, when it gets painful enough. And it's like this with most lessons. We screw up. It's part of being human. We all try to avoid screwing up. That's really not the point. It's to learn from screwing up. If we recognize and admit that we screwed up, we become less likely to make the same mistake. If we don't recognize and admit it, we'll just keep making it forever. So, we don't need more angst about our mistakes. The pain and inconvenience of making them, like spending all night outside or emotionally being isolated because we're not loving, that motivates us to change our behavior. We often need that pain to motivate us. So the practical lesson learned, doing the responsible thing, sometimes takes belt and suspenders, +3, like 5 extra, this is her writing, 5 extra key copies made at Walmart, 1 attached to the belt loop of my pants, 1 to a lanyard hooked to my bag, 1 in my wallet, on and on and on. So short of forgetting my bag, wearing pajama pants outside, having a burglar find both of my hiding places, and my friend losing her key, I should never be locked out again. And again, that is how we learn lessons. So you had to be locked out twice before you were willing to do what it took so it didn't happen the third time. Feeling guilty or stupid doesn't help. We just make the mistakes and then we take the measures to not make them the next time. So this is over a simple mechanical thing. It's the same way that we learn things emotionally. This is a story about Zoe, who's now 2. Her mother says, she pretends to eat my nose. Those of you who don't have toddlers, Zoe's 2, that's actually a fairly common thing. It sounds bizarre, but it seems very funny to them. She pretends to eat my nose and then tells me, be sad, so she can practice loving me. So I pretend to cry, and she looks me deep in the eyes and kisses my cheeks and snakes her little baby arms around my neck and rubs my back, saying, I know, everything's okay. The reason this story is so lovely is, guess where she learned this language? She learned it from her mom. Mom continues, I catch her doing this with her dolls and stuffed animals too. She'll say, you hurt, Elmo? I know, it's okay. I got you. We all love it when somebody has got us, to use the expression of a 2-year-old. Got our back, got us if we fall, gets us when we're sad. How lovely that this 2-year-old feels so gotten, is so sure that everything will be, in her word, okay, that she can offer that kind of support to others, even if she's practicing on stuffed animals. These little lessons matter. Criminals and murderers, because I've worked with a lot of prisoners, learn their criminal behaviors when they're very young by disregarding the feelings of other people. Loving adults learn their behaviors similarly when they're at a very young age, like this little kid. It's very cool. This is from a delightful woman who lives in Washington State. She said, last year, Garth and I, Garth lives in Washington State too, went to the aquarium in Atlanta. If you haven't been, it's a very cool aquarium. We sat in the bleachers to watch the dolphin show, and when it was over, as we were walking to the end of the row to start down the stairs to go out, we had to stop and wait for the crowd ahead of us. As we were waiting, an older couple came to the end of our row. Garth stopped to let them go by, and as he did, he put out his hand for the woman to hold as she started down the stairs. Her husband didn't say anything, but he immediately reached out and he put his hand on Garth's arm, and Garth helped him down too. The man wanted some of what his wife was getting. It's hard to describe the look on the man's face, but I think it was the closest word I could come to is eager. It took 5 total seconds, but Garth really touched 2 complete strangers in a very loving way. People really are dying to be loved. I'm still reading what she wrote. It really is a gift to them and to us when we're able to find ways to share real love with them. I see no reason to improve on what she wrote. This is from Jeanette about Sylvie, who's now 5. They keep changing their ages just to annoy me. I think at the time she wrote this, she was, 4 or 5. Jeanette says, Sylvie wanted to help make macaroni, but the water was already boiling. So when she asked, can I help? I hesitated and didn't know right off what she could do in that moment. So because of my pause, she rephrased, can I please help? So the point obviously wasn't about the please, it was just mom trying to think of a way for her to help. So we came up with stuff for her to do. She recycled the macaroni box. She cleared and set the table. She measured the milk and butter for the sauce, did all kinds of things to help in the kitchen. She noticed that she feels what she calls better or happy or good when she's included and learning, and especially when she's working. These are the lessons that children carry with them throughout the rest of their life. Children who are taught to feel loved, to be loving, to be responsible as they're taught how to work. These children do not end up in prison. These are the children who do not end up as addicts to any of limitless number of possible addictive substances or behaviors. Teach them young, really young. So I've told you about Zoe as a toddler, and for years I've been telling you about Sylvie, probably starting about the time that she was a toddler. I want to tell you I want to share with you something that I recently learned. Recently somebody told me about a parenting book. And at first, when they told me about it, I thought they were joking. So I looked it up on Amazon. No, they were not joking. One of the best-selling parenting books now on Amazon is titled Toddlers Are A-Holes. That's capital A, 2 asterisks, holes. And if you work real hard, you can think of what the asterisks are for. Toddlers are A-holes, colon. I didn't mean to juxtapose A-holes and colon, but I mean colon, the punctuation mark. It's not your fault. That's the title of the book. Really? I'm not kidding. I read the Amazon summary of the book. I got to say, I admit that I did not read the book, nor will I be likely to. But the summary of the book, which the author almost invariably helps to write, if not writes completely, said this. Toddler, this is a quote, toddler a-holery, this is a new word, is a normal part of human development, not unlike puberty, except this stage involves throwing food on the floor and taking swings at the people who pay your way in life. Are you hearing the victimhood at all yet? For parents of toddlers, it's a you better laugh so you don't cry, period. Continuing the quote, this hilarious, satirical guide to toddlerhood offers parents instant and very welcome comic relief, along with the very good news that it's not your fault. Apparently, this message has acquired a large and enthusiastic following. There's a website on the subject, which is, in a word, horrifying. Toddlers, contrary to what the book would lead you to believe, do not intentionally make their parents' lives difficult, which would be the message of claiming that they are a-holes. Children are simply constantly exploring what they can do. What is possible, what makes noise, how the world works, and more. One of my sons has 3 little kids, and one of his little kids is 3. And this little kid is constantly trying to see where he can put stuff, how far he can drop stuff from, how far he can throw stuff. And the other day, they got a few months ago, they got the cutest little puppy. And darling little Max wanted to see what would happen if he sealed the puppy in a Ziploc bag. Fortunately, this was not one of the occasions when his parents had left him in the room for very long. Max wasn't trying to kill the dog. He was trying to see what would happen if you put the dog in a Ziploc bag, which is what little 3-year-olds do, this toddler. I have watched the reactions of young children as their parents have simply become a little impatient. They're devastated by the disapproval. Now imagine how a child perceives a parent who regards him or her, the child, as an a-hole. I can tell you from considerable experience that if parents unconditionally love and teach children from the beginning, 2 things happen reliably. First, toddlers learn that in the process of their exploration of the world, some things are not acceptable. Max learned we don't ever put the dog in a Ziploc bag. Regrettably, he later had to be taught that you don't put him in a Tupperware container either. Because in his little mind, it's not the same thing. Because they're not. But they learn. They still explore the world, but they do it in ways that are much less likely to harm themselves or others. They learn that you don't explore the road by running across a busy street. Second, parents have fun with their children as they learn, rather than being annoyed with them. They let them do more things. They sit right there with them and love and teach them instead of just letting them run wild and then thinking badly of them when they make a mistake, which is, of course, unavoidable when they're unsupervised. Neither toddlers nor any other children in the world are naturally a-holes. They're not. Write it down. The book is wrong. Rather, they are eager to be loved and taught as they experience the delights and challenges of the world and the people in it. Kids are wonderful. They just need our loving and teaching. This is from a coach. I'm coaching someone whose 9-year-old granddaughter is generally victim-y, but recently got very creative with her victimhood. When she made a mistake, the granddaughter the 9-year-old, started weeping and wailing that she had an evil spirit inside her, and she was so guilty and nobody loved her. Her grandmother is a religiously devout woman and was alarmed and distracted by the content of the victim behavior and at a loss how to deal with this. So it all went straight onto the field of death immediately and stayed there. Now that the granddaughter has seen this effect, she will doubtless try it again. No kidding. Of course she'll try it again. She managed to get her grandmother all worked up just by saying a single sentence. So of course she's going to do it again. The granddaughter has found a hook or a handle to manipulate her grandmother and very likely now her parents. So the coach writes, what would be a loving way that a grandmother can handle this the next time? The grandmother and the parents have to stop this right now. There are certain behaviors that just become really destructive in a hurry. She needs to take the girl's shoulders or her face with both hands and say, look at me. Look at me right now. You just made a mistake. That's all. Mistakes are how we learn. We have to make mistakes. You do not have an evil spirit inside you, and you have to stop thinking like that. And then she embraces the girl and either repeats it or she has the girl repeat it after her. This stuff can get weird in a hurry, and then people start talking about satanic rituals, and before long you've got stories that are just unbelievable, and they all started from a thought that the kid had because they saw a movie. Notice, as I'm saying what the grandmother or the parent could say to the child, notice my tone of voice. Firm, but calm. If you get excited, you just reward the kid and the kid's going to do it again. But this is a pretty certain piece of evidence that this little girl already thinks very little of herself, that she has to go to these lengths to get somebody to pay any kind of attention to her, especially when it's this negative. This email, new subject, is from one of the most frightened and emotionally crippled people I've ever known. She said, I wanted to share with you a good experience that I had talking to Bruce, a young guy that I met in a real love group. He came to me asking if I could help him with a situation with his sister. As he shared with me the details of the situation, I felt overwhelmed with all the information, and I thought, this is way beyond my capabilities. Maybe Greg could help with this, but I am lost. Now, that's an understandable first reaction because people often have problems that seem impossibly complicated. But then she continues, Remember, this is a really, in the past, frightened and emotionally crippled woman. She said, but I wanted to try. Whoa. Showing some courage, some faith, and frankly, how sweet. Because I could feel how alone he felt, how responsible he felt to fix everything himself, and how he was just starving for somebody to listen to him. I decided to let go of all of the details that were overwhelming me, stop thinking entirely, and just follow the feeling of what he was saying. And that's when I felt compassion and peace. That's brilliant stuff. This is the kind of stuff coaches could benefit from. It's a beautiful lesson for all of us. So I'm going to read it again. I could feel how alone he felt. I could feel that he felt responsible to fix it all himself and how he was starving for somebody to listen to him. So I let go of the details, stopped thinking, and followed the feeling. And then I felt compassion and peace. Beautiful. And this from a very frightened person in the past. She continues, without thinking about it, notice again, no thinking, I just spoke, telling him I didn't know the answer for his sister, but I understood what it feels like to be alone and responsible for someone else's pain. I saw his face wash with relief just at being heard. Is that fun or what? People are rarely really listened to. We get caught up in the details. We come out with stories of our own. We run off on tangents. We give advice. We control. We give our opinions. We even argue. Rarely are we listened to. She continues, it was the first time that I can remember sharing with somebody what I saw simply because I wanted to, rather than out of a sense of obligation or need to look good myself. I felt peaceful and centered, and in a moment, I gained deeper confidence that I really can do this. It's a feeling that I know can only get better from here. Wonderful experience, an experience that we could all learn from. This email's from a substitute teacher who was asked to teach an autistic child in a public school. Oh, wow, would that be difficult? So you've got a child who's already labeled autistic, who is used to having the same single teacher with him every day. And then along comes a substitute teacher who would immediately be perceived as a threat. This would be a very difficult child. So I told her just to mostly love him, occasionally tell him what standards of behavior are required, but mostly just loosen up the chain that other people have put on him and just let him try stuff. She wrote back and said, I did more of what you said with Donnie as the week went on, the autistic boy. I exercised more courage and faith. The next time that they only let the kids be outside for recess for 10 minutes, I told the teachers that Donnie really likes being physical, which he has used to the disadvantage of everybody in the class on many occasions. And I asked for one of their badges so that I could stay outside with him and be able to get back in the building. I stayed out with him for an hour and a half. Now, mind you, this is a special education substitute teacher who's only got one child. Kind of reminds you of being a parent, doesn't it? We did what he wanted. We threw rocks as far as we could. Then we spent a long time trying to dig up a big rock out of the dirt with sticks. That's my kind of kid. There were moments when I would get a little scared about what he was doing and wondering if I was doing the right thing. But I would think about the book Under the Bridge, which is nice to hear, and just keep focusing on Donnie instead of myself. This is great stuff, honey. Your greatest step was you paid attention to him instead of a curriculum, instead of what other teachers would think of you, instead of the schedule, instead of how long recess was supposed to be. You paid attention to him, which we all tend to respond to. This isn't just about an autistic kid. If you're somebody who doesn't happen to teach autistic kids in public school, that doesn't mean this doesn't apply to you. It applies to all of us. She continues, I asked him about his life, his family. I asked him about stuff he's interested in. He told me, now mind you, this is a kid who in the beginning didn't talk to anybody. He told me that his daddy is in jail for being mean to his mama. One can only imagine what that involves. And he named a bunch of other people in his family, like as in a list of people in his family who are also in jail. The first question that comes to my mind is this kid genuinely autistic? Maybe, but it's just as likely that he behaves like he's autistic because he's in an emotional prison. Just like there are finally world-class experts in ADD, ADHD, I've lost track of what the present acronym is, who have taken the symptoms for ADD and put them side by side with the symptoms of a child who is just in pain, has an earache, for example. Turns out it's the same list. So does the kid really have ADD, or is the kid just in emotional or physical pain? Hard to say, but until we get rid of the emotional pain, how can you know? How can you know if this kid's autistic until the kid is emotionally nourished? You can't. And as long as we keep shoving pills at little kids, how are we ever going to know whether they're normal or whether they actually have an organic disease? She continues. He said to me more than once, with his eyebrows lifted and with a look of amazement, so I can stay out here as long as I want? That's not a question an autistic kid would ask. It just isn't. This is a kid who's starving to death for unconditional love. And notice, what he was really asking you was, so I can really trust you? That's the real question. And each time you did something with him, dug a rock out of the ground or threw a rock or stayed out a little longer, this kid's going, I think I'm kind of liking this chick, my new teacher. She continues, the first answers that came to mind were about me. The other teachers might get mad. I might get in trouble. I didn't say those answers. I said, eventually, to the child, it'll get dark and there might be ice on the ground. Now, listen to this lady's response. This is brilliant. Kids love it when you don't take yourself too seriously. She said, eventually it'll get dark and there might be ice on the ground if we sleep out here. The kid didn't expect that. But staying out here will be fun. I mean, honey, that's just perfect. Whereas what almost every other teacher in the world would say is, well, no, of course we can't stay out here as long as we want to. There are rules to be kept. It says in paragraph 12.d. subparagraph 4 that we can't do that. You listen to the kid. Then you continued. Then I asked him if he'd ever been camping, and we talked about that for a while. It was so pleasant just being outside and digging in the dirt with the sun shining on us and loving this kid. I said, it's nice being outside, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it's warm. It's fun. I felt a peace come over both of us. When the junior high kids came out, this was an elementary school kid, Danny got scared. I asked if he wanted to go in, and he said yes. And so we got up and he walked slowly over to the garden and he picked 2 flowers for his teachers on our way in. We delivered the first one in his class, and then he wanted to find his other teacher. And instead of saying no, I said, I don't know where she is, do you? We walked peacefully through the halls. This is not usually how he walks. And he knew exactly where she was. He knocked on the door to the class and peacefully and quietly delivered the flower to her at the back of the room without disrupting anyone. Now you want to guess what my opinion is about whether this kid really has autism? No. Freak me out. The kid responded to love. That's what he's missing. Not missing neurons. She concludes, he did not stay peaceful forever, but by the end of the week, I went from hating the job and blaming Danny, the school, and the teachers to enjoying going to the same place every day, building relationships with other teachers at the school, and feeling a part of things. The music teacher told me more than once that I was really patient with Danny, which I wasn't always, but obviously more than most people. And the teacher said, I just love you, and gave me a big hug. The music teacher gave a hug to the substitute teacher. Looking back at the end of the week, though far from perfect, things were going a whole lot better for Danny at school than they were on Monday when I started, and I found myself wishing that I could keep working with him. What a lesson. Woohoo. What a lesson for all of us. Thanks for sharing it. Lovely story. This is from a woman who's been in real love for several years. She said, I've been talking to a guy off and on for a few months. It started as dating, but I quickly realized that it wasn't going to work. Instead of saying goodbye, I left him hanging. And he texts me sometimes. The other day, he was telling me about some video game he was playing, and he says, I think I'm hooked, which prompted me to say, yep, you're addicted. He started to defend, and I asked more questions. He defended more and took offense. Eventually, he got angry with me and felt attacked. I realized later that maybe I was being intrusive. Maybe. The whole conversation made me wonder why I keep dragging this thing out. I need to say goodbye to him. I want to do it lovingly. I don't always know the words to say, and I don't want to just disappear. Tell me what you think about saying this. Quote, this is her suggestion about what she would say to him. I was being intrusive in our last conversation. My mistake. You get to decide to live your life how you want to, and you did not ask me for my opinion. I also wanted to say that I haven't been completely honest with you. I've known for a while now that our relationship isn't what I want, nor can it become what I want. I have no intention of taking this further. I've strung you along. My mistake. Again, I'm going to stop doing that and say goodbye now. I've enjoyed our time together. Thank you for that. Goodbye. Then she concludes to me with, how can I do that better, or is that good enough? For those of you who didn't catch all the content of her letter, listen to it again, because it's a perfect goodbye letter. Perfect. You apologize for the mistakes you make. You thank them for their time. You tell them it's just not going to work out. It's beautiful for you to realize what you did, to admit it, and to just disappear. Because you've already learned from your brief interaction with him that it would be a disastrous relationship. You may have noticed there's a theme running throughout all of these. And that is that all of these people, from the autistic child to the toddler to the man who's addicted to video games at age 50, everybody is starving to death to get loved. All of us have an opportunity, and if you're listening, you're taking advantage of the opportunity to find the love that we need, to learn to trust it, and it may take some practice and some guidance to remember the love that we have, and then eventually, as you've heard examples from several people here in these letters, and then eventually learn to share the love we have with others. If we do that, our happiness is absolutely guaranteed. We'll see you in a week.